Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome along to this week's Better Managers Briefing. I'm Matt Roberts, and today the focus of our briefing is going to be around the Chartered Management Consultant Award, with a particular focus on the new client panel that we're working with. Delighted to welcome my guests today. Firstly, Patrick Dunne, whose executive career was spent in private equity, working regularly with management consultants. He's now an experienced board chair and chairs the ChMC Oversight Board. Welcome, Patrick. I'm also delighted to be joined today by Gerry Pennell. Gerry's an experienced C-suite executive with multiple sector experience over many years and has worked alongside and with management consultants over the past 20 years. Welcome, Gerry.
Thank you.
Great to have you both with us today, guys. And the Chartered Management Consultant Award is something that's starting to really gain momentum and go from strength to strength now. Patrick, you chair the board that's charged with delivering the award, and you've got great experience both in terms of hiring and working directly with management consultants. Who's involved in the Chartered Management Consultant project, and why is it important to the consultancy industry?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Well, for those not familiar with ChMC, the qualification is a joint venture really between the CMI and the Management Consultancy Association. CMI has got the power to convey chartered status, and it gets that through the Privy Council. And it's got a lot of experience of accreditation of management qualifications, so that's an ideal partner to have. And the MCA, of course, has a deep knowledge of the consulting profession and a deep network and live kind of connection with the consulting sector. So that's who's involved, if you like. And the aim really is to create a recognised standard for qualifications, knowledge and experience for the consulting profession. This is a very big industry. I mean, according to the latest MCA report out last week, it's £12.5 billion a year. And so as part of our services sector, it's a very important generator of income for the country. Also, I mean, the work that consultants do has an influence on so many aspects of our lives. I mean, pretty well everything we do, everything we touch, at some point has probably had some consultancy sort of input along the way. So it's reassuring, I think, for us all to know that those doing the work are of a high standard and meet the competency framework that we have established. So I think there are obvious benefits for clients of consulting firms and their stakeholders, obvious benefits for the consulting firms and for the individual consultants doing this. It's clearly a differentiation from those who don't have the ChMC standard. So that's basically why I think it's important.
Great. So a really good differentiator in the marketplace and a real sign of commitment to best practice. And Gerry, you're leading the client input to the ChMC standard through the client panel that was formed earlier in the year. So perhaps you could just start by telling us a little bit about who's on the panel and why this award should matter to the buyers and clients of consultants.
Yes, thanks, Matt. And as Patrick mentioned, it's the clients that should be the true beneficiaries of this award. So I'm quite delighted to be leading this client panel input. But before I talk about who's on the panel, I probably should just explain a little bit about the role of the client panel. So it's I see it as having two dimensions, really. First of all, to sort of assist, advise, advocate the promotion of ChMC award to clients, but also to provide feedback the other way on the competency framework itself, but also its impact as things progress over the next few years. So who's on the panel? Well, as well as myself, it includes the Chief Transformation Officer at Johnson Matthey, the Chief Executive at the Student Loans Company, and the Category Director for HR, Marketing and Professional Services at Barclays. So between us, I think we've got a pretty broad coverage of sectors and also of sort of technical disciplines, if you like. So I think that makes the panel quite well suited to provide the kind of input that we're looking for. The second part of your question, why should it matter to consultancy buyers? I kind of touched on that. I think it's the clients who should get the real benefits, and I think the real benefits are around assurance in the quality and the integrity of the product that's being delivered. And as Patrick mentioned, management consultancy is pretty widespread, but you normally employ management consultants whenever there's a significant problem to be addressed, or a big challenge, a big change. So the investment you're making is not just a question of the fees that go to the sector. It's a question of the impact on your firm and the commitment that the rest of the firm is making. So these are big, quite often big things that are done with management consultants. So having the right level of assurance in the quality and the integrity of what's provided, I think, is key for the success of the client organisation. Secondarily, my other sort of reason for being quite enthusiastic about this is I think it's quite pro-competitive. So I'm guilty, and I suspect many others are, of tending to use the firms that I know, whether big or small or medium, because you know them, you trust them, you know the people. I think having a kite mark, if you like, a badge of assurance, actually will make it easier for clients to have a more competitive approach to the way consultants are selected.
Mm-hmm. Great, okay, thank you. So Patrick, the award officially launched back in April, but I think it's important to point out that this was preceded by a very successful pilot period. So how does the award work, and what's the uptake looking like so far?
Yeah, so I think you're going to put all the detail, the link to the detail in the chat. There's a lot on both CMI and MCA websites about it. I mean, essentially, we wanted to have the charter status take account of the different levels of experience that consultants already have. So, you've got people who've got a huge amount of experience, and so there's a sort of experienced professional route. You've also got a lot of people who are on their way to getting that, and so there's a sort of the professional who's on an accredited program, so we can accredit programs from firms. And then there's people who just, they may be individual, or they may be an individual within a firm who just want to take the qualification and do it that way. So we've designed, and I should say we've co-designed really, because the whole thing, the competency framework, deciding how many routes to get the qualification have all been designed with both clients and consulting firms. So I think we went through a pretty rigorous process to get there. Whatever route you go through, you have to demonstrate that you meet the competency framework. And this is a pretty detailed thing, but to summarize, there's kind of 4 aspects to that competency framework. First of all, and probably most important, are the ethics and professional standards kind of group of things. The second relates to sort of leadership and management. As Gerry said, some of these projects are fairly sizable. So you want people who actually show leadership, can manage, can deliver things on time, within budget, and in a very professional way. Then there's a whole set of things to do with the consulting and operating environment that are specific to the consulting world. And then finally, the 4th category, which is really important, and I think is another aspect of what we're doing with ChMC, is around professional and personal development. To actually stay a quality consultant, you have to stay current, you have to stay in tune with what's going on, and you have to be aware of the latest trends, because if you're helping someone else, guiding them through things like that, then you need to know that yourself. We have an oversight board, and our responsibility is really to make sure that the thing has real quality and that it retains that quality. Gerry has talked about the client panel as well, so that quality is relevant and acceptable to the clients of consulting businesses. I mean, the traction we've had so far has been actually tremendous. It's been sort of ahead of expectation. So as of yesterday, I think we had 455 people already through the whole process. So they're chartered management consultants already. There are another 30 who are going through their assessment imminently, so that's sort of weeks. And then there are another 200 who will gain the qualification in the very near future. But we also have a group of 1,500 who started that journey through one of those 3 progression routes. We've also been accrediting firm programs. So of the 14 firms that we work with on the pilot, all of those have renewed, and we've got a further 18 firms in the pipeline there. One of the great things actually is the feedback we get from the people who've got the qualification and the pride with which, we can see them doing this through their social media. They're putting on their social media, they're really proud to have this qualification. And we're already finding, clients are starting to ask, how many ChMCs will be on this job. So we're at a very early stage, I think, in the scheme of something like this, but I think it's sort of moving on quite well. We've also started work in terms of what the academy will look like. So this is, around the professional development and training kind of aspect I said before. And it's worth noting that so far, about 10% of those who have gained the qualification are independent consultants. We expect that proportion to rise because obviously the bulk of the people so far have been through the pilot firms that we identified, and we have almost all of the major firms signed up. So we're expecting that to grow.
Great, thank you, Patrick. And yeah, I think it's a great point that this is an award that's there for consultants of any scale, right the way across the sector, and to provide that sort of pro-competitive piece that Gerry talked about earlier on through that consistent and rigorous standard. So Gerry, it's great to hear about the momentum that Patrick's clearly outlined is gathering. Are you seeing traction starting to develop from the client perspective, and what do you see happening with that regard in the future?
Yeah, well, I think it's still early days. The client panel was initiated a few months ago, but certainly the level of enthusiasm in the client panel is very high, and there are some early straws in the wind. So, for example, I'm aware of one firm that has signed up to the program precisely because their government client asked them to. And the more we see of that, the better. I think the key activity now is really around awareness building. So I think the awareness, as far as I can tell, is quite high in the firms. I think it's less high in the client sectors and organizations. So I think really it's about a structured marketing and communication program from the MCA and the CMI, and then the client panel will assist with that. And I'm seeing in government in particular a willingness to embrace ChMC as part of procurement process, and I'm hoping we will start to build a bit of a critical mass in the private sector, although I think it's more organisationally complex simply because of the number of organisations you're talking about in the private sector. So I think that's the main answer to your question. It's about awareness, it's about communication, it's about building the profile of the award amongst buyers. Secondarily, the client panel has also started to provide some feedback the other way into the competency framework. So, for example, one member of the panel raised ESG as something that really ought to be factored in to the list of things that consultants have at least a basic level of understanding of, which I think is also critical if you think about what organisations are going to need going forward and things that should be taken account of in a typical consultancy assignment.
I think as well as a question come in from Dana or Dana, apologies if I've got the pronunciation wrong, but do you see the competency framework being regularly reviewed to ensure currency and relevance of the chartership on an ongoing basis? Absolutely, and Gerry has already given you a good example of that. I think what's important is to do that in a structured way and a thoughtful and rigorous and robust way. So I think we're planning essentially on doing a more thorough review once we've got to 1,000. So we'll have a good body of evidence then to look back. But there will be things that will be constantly happening. This is true of all the qualifications that CMI accredits. That relevance and quality is really important, and because there's ongoing development through the academy that we're creating, there'll be a mechanism as well to actually deliver and communicate the things that we think that are changing as we go.
Absolutely, yeah, that's quite right, Patrick. And Dana's quick off the mark getting her question in, and for those of you that are watching live, if you've got a question that you'd like to pose to Patrick or to Gerry, then please do type that into the live chat, and we'll come to as many of those questions as we can before the end of the session. I'd like to just throw one question at both of you before we move to those questions from the audience, though, please, Patrick and Gerry. So I'd like really just to understand a little bit from both of you about what you feel is the most important impact of chartered management consultant that you can see coming over the next, let's say, 3 years. And Patrick, let's start with your views on that one, please.
I think it's to do with confidence and the word that Gerry used before, which is around assurance. I think if people have confidence, they'll be more willing to buy. I think there's a lot of fantastic consultants who don't have a big name firm who will benefit from this, and I think the big name firms will benefit considerably. Also, I think for those individual consultants as well, they'll be more portable when they're working internationally. So I know from my own experience outside the UK that a chartered qualification is something of value and is something of competitive value. So I think for those firms and those individuals who have that chartered status or that people who are chartered on their team, if they're a firm, I think that will help in terms of competition. And if we look at what's our economic backdrop at the moment, our services sector has been hit by Brexit, by the pandemic, and I think anything that we can do to support that is a good thing. So I'm hoping that confidence and that assurance that people will gain through being chartered will support business development and quality, basic quality of the work done.
Great, thank you. Gerry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Patrick said it all in some ways. For me, the key word is assurance, and it's assurance from clients in the quality of what they're buying. And I guess for me, in 3 years' time, I would hope we can look back and see that many clients are using ChMC as part of their buying processes, and that ChMC is allowing them to broaden their use of firms, so they don't just stick to the firm they know that we talked about before, but actually they broaden the range of advisors and consultants that they use. So that's the sort of thing I'm looking for, an increased level of confidence in a client's investment in management consulting. Just to another point, I mean, something we haven't mentioned is that prior to my being a buyer, I was also a consultant myself back in the day, and I would have loved actually to have had this kind of professional certification as part of my career. I think one thing you feel as a management consultant is you're gaining all this usually fantastic experience in all kinds of interesting and usually quite challenging situations, but it's not validated or measured in any way. So I think actually that's another dimension to what I'd like to see in 3 years' time is a pride in the profession as well as an assurance from the clients.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great message for consultants out there. And if you are a consultant and you're interested in learning more about becoming chartered, then there's a link in the description to today's event and also in the live chat where you can find out more. And I'd also encourage you to sign up to come to our forthcoming masterclass event, which is taking place over the coming weeks. And if you're a buyer of consultancy services, again, click on the link to the website where you'll find out more about chartered management consultants and why you should be thinking about looking to request that the ChMC is part of your project team. Okay, so we're going to go over to some questions from the audience now, and the first question comes from Alex. Thanks, Alex. And they say, to raise awareness within firms and to aid the competitive nature you speak of, do you see some form of online directory of chartered management consultants being of value, which is freely available to access online?
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, it's not something we're currently planning to do because we've got a limited resource and we're focused on getting people through the qualification and also setting up the academy process. But I think that's a really good idea and one that we can put to the Oversight Board and the Client Panel and see what they think, as well as obviously the teams who are working really hard at CMI and MCA to deliver this, who actually we haven't really acknowledged yet, but we really should. I mean, to set something like this up with the speed with which they've done it and the quality with which they've done it, it's a real testament to the strength of both teams.
Great, thank you.
Certainly, my instinct on this one, and I haven't discussed it with the client panel, my instinct is that there's some mileage in this, actually. And I see it as being quite attractive from a client's point of view, to be able to identify quite quickly who of the various consultants you might be talking to have this qualification. So I think it's an interesting idea and worth exploring.
Excellent. So food for thought from Alex there. Thank you, Alex, for a great suggestion. The next question comes from Rose, and she asks, what advice would you give to management consultants in relation to choosing chartered management consultant over other professional accreditations? Gerry, I wonder whether you want to take that one.
Well, I think I'll go back to the comment I made before, which is at the moment there is no real qualifications for management consulting as such. So if your career path is around management consulting, to me it's fairly natural that you would go after this particular award, because it's the award that verifies, if you like, and assures what you do as a management consultant. Obviously, plenty of management consultants have other professional qualifications, for example, in accounting or IT or whatever it might be, and those are important. But in terms of being qualified as a management consultant, to me, this is the one.
Absolutely, Patrick.
Yeah, I think Gerry's hit the nail on the head. But also, I suppose the fundamental point is, a bit like we're taking the chartered accountancy qualifications. Are you seeing taking that qualification as a route and a learning and a kite mark to lead to other things? I think doing this gives you great optionality, doesn't it? And you've got that optionality with a bit of assurance. So if you do decide to move from consulting to go in-house or to do something else, you'll have that with you for forever, just as the chartered accountants do. So I think that's why. Whether it's I'm mildly dyslexic, so I sometimes have difficulty reading the lines, and I think I've read into the next question. I was just about to answer that from Jenny, but
well, that's teed it up nicely. So yeah, Jenny's asking us she's interested to hear thoughts on whether the chartered award should become a mandatory requirement in the future for all management consultants to ensure quality and consistency across the profession. So Patrick, what are your views?
I think initially we really want to build traction for this because people think it's a good idea. It will be helpful to both clients and individuals. So we didn't see the need to make it mandatory. I think what we'd really like is that, a feeling of why wouldn't you? Why would you, once there's critical mass, and it's obviously not right yet to say, you should only use chartered management consultants, but once there's critical mass, I think, why would a client not want one? Just as with chartered accountants and other professions. So I don't think we've got an initial feeling that we would make it mandatory, but who knows in the fullness of time.
I think it's kind of up to client organisations to work out whether they wish to make this mandatory at some point, or where I'd like to start with Patrick really is highly desirable.
Yeah,
absolutely. Our next question comes from Terrell, and maybe Gerry, this is one for you, given your prior experience as a consultant. Terrell asks, what advice you would give to someone who's just starting out in the world of management consulting?
Okay, tough question actually, because I think a lot depends on whether you're joining the profession straight out of university or whether you're joining as a sort of mid-career professional. But if I had to choose one word, it would be kind of dive in, get stuck into the client problems, and learn from your seniors and your and the people you work with. I think, speaking for myself, I probably learned more in the 5 or 6 years I was doing management consulting than I did at any other part of my business career, and that set me up for later things, I think. So yeah, it's get stuck in and learn.
Yeah, and I mean, I just add to that before you can influence anyone, they need to respect you. So, build that early track record of just doing things really, really well and bringing fresh insights that people necessarily haven't thought of before, because that will enable you then to have influence.
Absolutely. So those are all the questions that we've had from the live audience today. So thank you to everybody that's been watching and that's provided questions through to us. And Patrick, Gerry, many thanks to both of you for your time today and the insights that you've provided. As I mentioned, if you're interested in finding out more about the Chartered Management Consultant Award, then please do click on the link in the live chat and in the description box below the video. And if the time's right for you to start pursuing your application, do sign up for the forthcoming digital masterclass that's coming in the next few weeks. We look forward to seeing you there. But Patrick, Gerry, many thanks. And I'd like to wish everybody a happy weekend. And we'll be back next week with another Better Managers Briefing. Thank you.
Very
Thanks.
good.